The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
What's up, everybody? It's time for Need to Know. Kip Keefer with you another week on TKR. And man, if you are a news junkie or are into world events or just pencil in anything that fits in that category, you are on overload right now, as I am, because there is so much happening after the unbelievable magical mystery tour by President Trump last week to the Middle East, where he brought back not 5, not 8, not 9, not 10, but $11 trillion in business commitments from 3 of the most wealthy, successful countries in the Middle East. And those countries, of course, are Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Now, let me clarify, if you're hearing me say Qatar, I know it's Qatar, but the people who live there, the people who run the government, they call their country Qatar. And I've heard all kinds of journalist morons saying Qatar. That is not correct. So if anybody corrects you, if you say Qatar, you're saying it like the people who live there say it. Anyway, he brought back commitments from all of those countries, $11 trillion in major American investment, plants, manufacturing. The Qatar deal alone that included Boeing and General Electric, both of those CEOs were on the trip with Trump. He brought like 18 major executives of some of the biggest companies in the country. And just those 2 commitments alone to build a fleet of about 400 Boeing jets over the next few years with General Electric engines means that one deal is going to be 160,000 jobs for people here in the United States. And these aren't sweeping up minimum wage jobs. These are high-skilled technician jobs, different facets of laborers, people that will do all the heavy work in terms of building these ultra-modern jets. And I mean, that's just one deal. There are so many others. That tour was amazing. And what it also does, because there's negotiations continuing with the biggest bad actor, of course, in the Middle East, Iran, the situation there becomes much more promising, because with every Arab country that Trump approaches and gets on board, and there's no better way to talk peace than to include prosperity. I always tell you on this show, follow the money. You can always solve any dilemma by putting the money in the game or tracing where the money's gone. In this particular situation, the fact that Donald Trump comes to these countries and gets this hero's welcome. I mean, could you ever imagine on the streets of Riyadh and the capital of Qatar and Abu Dhabi, which is in the UAE, people in the streets waving American flags in the heart of what just a few years ago, Saudi Arabia, I think of the 17 perpetrators of 9/11, 13 of them were Saudi born. We had the controversy back in Biden's, well, we'll call it the Biden administration, more on that momentarily. But during the time that he was the figurehead president, when the big controversy was the writer, and he did not work for the Washington Post, he was a contributor, Khashoggi, was brutally murdered at an embassy in Turkey. The finger was pointed at the Saudis and this new crown prince. And Biden wouldn't even shake his hand at a formal meeting. Relations were chilly. He called Saudi Arabia a pariah state. This is a country that controls prices for oil around the world and is, probably one of the most important, influential countries certainly in the Middle East. And look at the turn of the relations. People say, well, how can we just, how I've heard criticism of Trump this week, and of course that's not unusual because that right now he is the daddy of the Democrat Party, because anything daddy does they don't like. It's he who triggers all their reaction. They have no ideas, they have no policies. All they have is bitch about Donald Trump and try and convince people that he is the great Satan, he is the Hitler, he is a threat to democracy, he is the constitutional crisis, blah, blah, blah. They have nothing. And this guy is showing, as I talked about on the show last week, unbelievable leadership because he is going a mile a minute. He never stops. He's making deals. He's trying to mend fences. Japan did a sneak attack on December 7th, 1941, and we committed thousands of lives in fighting World War II in the Pacific against Japan, came out victorious in that particular conflict, actually dropped two nuclear weapons on Japan to end that war. But here we sit, just a half century removed from World War II, and Japan is one of our most solid and important allies. So, if you have history, sure, you don't forget, but you do somewhat forgive in the interest of peace and prosperity. And that's what's happening here in this particular circumstance. So Trump goes there. It further, with more Middle Eastern countries that are highly influential, really getting into the America mode. Then you have Iran, who is the one archaic, prehistoric country that still espouses all of the ancient principles of the Islamic faith. And you continue to further isolate them. They have no support among their surrounding countries in the Middle East. So it really kind of puts them in an impossible position when Trump says, you can continue to develop your nuclear program for peaceful purposes, for power, etc., but you cannot enrich uranium to create nuclear weapons. That's not going to be permitted. It is not going to be allowed. And if Iran isn't reasonable and doesn't make a deal with this administration, they are not only going to be completely isolated, but they're not going to get any support from any of the surrounding countries there. Trump also took the time to have counsel with the new president of Syria. This guy was a established terrorist. They threw out the most corrupt government in the absolute world, the Assad regime that had ruled Syria for years and had all kinds of nefarious deals and arms arrangements and territorial rights to all of the bad actors in the Middle East. But Trump actually shook hands with this former Al-Qaeda terrorist and sat down and talked about America lessening some of the crippling sanctions that have basically bankrupted Syria. And, basically his tone was, we got to give them a chance to get back on their feet. Who knows? They might become valuable allies for us. So Iran's one of their main support outfits, although they were not financially well off and are really kind of a cluster, after the Assad regime was thrown out. But Trump is basically giving them a chance to get their act together and become a solid member of the global community. So this 4 or 5 days over there was absolutely extraordinary. This guy never stopped, had meetings with every principal in those countries, arrived to heroes' welcomes at the airport. The Crown Prince, who is the supreme ruler of Saudi Arabia, has never once greeted a head of state or anyone who's come to the country at the tarmac when the plane pulls up. But for Donald J. Trump, guess who was standing right at the bottom of the stairs of Air Force One? The Crown Prince there to greet him personally. When he arrived in UAE, they didn't even make Trump walk down a set of stairs. They pulled Air Force One into a private hangar, a gigantic facility, and wheeled up a platform to walk out, and where all the dignitaries and everybody welcomed him. And it was not a red carpet, as is customary with heads of state. This is very symbolic. My partner, Terry Quillian, who was on presidential advance teams in the George Bush and the first Trump administration, was pointing out all kinds of interesting, seemingly innocuous details that are very meaningful. The carpet they rolled out on that platform in UAE when Trump's Air Force One arrived and the doors open was purple. And you might say, purple, not red? Purple is the color of royalty. That is what is extended for supreme heads of state, people that are considered royalty in those visiting countries. And if that was really a cool thing that she called my attention to, of why that color was chosen. And it just gives you an idea. These countries want to affiliate with the United States. They recognize that the Middle East, being the steaming cauldron that it's been for so many years, all of the problems with the conflicts with Israel, Iran, of course, has been funding the three proxy army groups, Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah, for years and years. Israel has completely decimated Hezbollah. They're out of the picture. Hamas is hanging by a thread. And Trump bombed the bejesus out of the Houthis in recent weeks to make them stop shooting at naval ships for the United States and merchant ships from all countries of the world trying to navigate the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. The Houthis now have said, okay, enough. We'll stop the attacks, but the attacks will stop if Iran is brought to the table here. That will be the principal demand in this deal that Trump is brokering, that we will not bomb you to obliteration and destroy your nuclear program before you are able to enrich enough uranium to have a weapon. We will work with you. We will work with your economy. But the one thing in the deal that's absolutely essential is you will no longer fund these anti-Israel proxy armies, because it's a new day here. You got to get on board or you're going to be walking the plank, basically, is the message to Iran. And they're in an impossible position as militant and as just extremist as they are. They are almost in a position that they have to fold. A couple other things happening I wanted to talk about today. I'm sure you all saw the story break yesterday that Joe Biden, the most recent president, I still say that with great hesitation, because he really was in name the president, but he was not running the country. The tapes finally released this week. Axios, a media company, got hold of the actual tapes from the Robert Hur interview, talking about him having secret classified documents in his garage, in his basement. And remember this, and I've pointed this out many times, not only is that completely illegal for him to have the documents, it doesn't compare to President Trump, who was indicted on 60 some odd counts of having classified documents, when he was actually the president of the United States. The president can take classified materials with him when he leaves office. They trumped up, and pun intended, charges against Donald Trump to basically accuse him of being careless and talking to people about the information contained within. But as a former president, he is not it is permitted for him to have classified material. Joe Biden started taking classified material out of Washington and into his private situations in Delaware and in his offices at the University of Pennsylvania, where they found all kinds of documents. back when in the 70s when he was a senator. That is highly illegal. He can't have those documents. That is not permissible. So just the fact that he and Hillary Clinton on her server had classified material, she was Secretary of State. She was not the president, not allowed to do that. It has to be on a secure network. Anyway, the bottom line is, as you recall, her came out of that interview with Biden saying, this guy is clearly guilty. He's admitted to having the materials, but he is in no condition to be tried. No jury would convict him because he's a sympathetic old man who has a completely failed memory. And they released the transcript, and of course the White House threw a big fit. Robert Hur is doing this for political reasons. Robert Hur has a stellar career as just and he was in the Biden Department of Justice under the leadership of Merrick Garland, who was Biden's appointee. Hur had no political axe to grind. Hur actually did them a favor and said, I'm not going to prosecute because this guy's too far gone to even assist in his own defense. And we found out why he made that decision with the release of these tapes. It is the most painful thing to listen to. Every question Hur asked him, he mumbles, he stutters, he can't come up with an answer. He says things like, well, maybe that was like 2017 or 2018. I can't remember. And he asked at one point, what exactly years was I vice president? And by the way, vice presidents cannot have that material either. But anyway, if you hear the highlights on these tapes, he could not even carry on a conversation. He said, I don't remember at least 50 times, and he wasn't being evasive. He was struggling to get out phrases and words. This is why this guy was hidden away, did not do events, did not travel hardly at all. He was in bad shape, and now this is another giant piece of the puzzle, this diagnosis, because you don't get to stage 4 with this disease and metastasize bones surrounding the damaged areas and whatnot. That is things in the late stages of having this. This was the president of the United States who had a complete annual physical every single year. There is no way in hell this just happened in recent months or weeks. This is not the first diagnosis. There's no way that couldn't have been detected. But his last physical as president was in July of last year, 2024. That was just a couple weeks after the disastrous debate with Donald Trump, where Biden did basically the same thing, just stuttered and stammered throughout that whole event, said a bunch of things that didn't make any sense, completely exposed his condition of total dementia. But as you remember, and this was what makes these pieces fit, as you remember, there was a lot of information coming out, and now there's extensive books talking about they took 10 days to go to Camp David before that debate and isolate Biden for just practice sessions. And they had people hired to play Donald Trump, and he was going to be polished and ready to go. He barely participated. He said he was too tired. He was too worn out. He would maybe comply for an hour or two, and then he'd say he had to go take a nap. One day he just wandered off and didn't tell anybody where he was going. He ended up sitting on some kind of obscure balcony or porch at Camp David in a chair, and he was passed out, sound asleep. No wonder the debate performance was so disastrous. About 2 days after that debate, he showed up in Charlotte and did a campaign rally thing. And for whatever reason, they didn't resort to this in the debate, probably because he would come off as some kind of screaming lunatic. But whatever they gave him, whatever kind of amphetamine, the same thing they gave him for the State of the Union address back in 2023, when he, or maybe that was 2024 also, when he went to Congress and just delivered this screaming, aggressive, hostile speech, which was a complete takeaway from his stumbling and stammering. He did that in Charlotte, and people said, well, where was that on Tuesday night at the debate? And he had like 5 different stops planned in those next couple of weeks to do similar events to that. And then all of a sudden, you remember the news bulletin last summer, Joe Biden has got to cancel all of his Western. He was going to LA and Las Vegas and some other places. He suddenly canceled all of those appearances because he went back to Delaware because they said he had been infected for the third time with COVID, despite the fact that we watched him on national television take the injections, like all five boosters. This guy was the most shot up president of all time, between amphetamines and COVID vaccines. But the bottom line is, it makes some sense now because that was almost exactly the time in July of his annual physical. And I think they got the news that day of what was going on. And maybe they even knew the year before that he had some degree of prostate cancer. But don't buy that. Don't buy the bullet. And they're throwing this word. They're throwing this word in every press release. This is a very aggressive form of prostate cancer that has affected the president. They're only saying that to try and create the illusion for you and the American people that this is just a sudden thing that's happened to Joe Biden. That's all a bunch of BS. And the fact that I believe they already had the knowledge that he had this situation, at least by last summer, they didn't announce it because he was still running for re-election at that time, and that would have been an automatic disqualifier. He would not have been allowed to run. He could have run, but he wouldn't have gotten any support if he was, basically in a dire way with a very bad disease situation. So anyway, I'm not buying the banana that this is just a sudden revelation. I think they've known it all along. And you know who this really impugns and makes look terrible? Dr. Jill Biden. Yes, the good doctor with her education degree who met Joe Biden when she was working as an au pair and a nanny for his children while he ran to Washington and was being the senator. So she was doing a lot with her Dr. Jill Biden degree. She was a nanny, and they end up getting married. I think from day one, she took advantage of an old guy's, because she's many years younger. I think she took advantage of the situation. She was enjoying the trappings of living in the White House and being on magazine covers and flying all around the world in Air Force One, and also being the point person to keep Joe under wraps, keep him quiet, keep him away from everybody else, and basically, supposedly, communicate with him of what was going on and tell the Biden cabinet, which is really the Obama cabinet, because all of his major cabinet appointees were Obama graduates. Susan Rice and Sullivan, the national security advisor, all of those individuals, all coming out of the Obama administration. Jill Biden was the de facto president of the United States. So Donald Trump right now is listed as the 47th president. I think he's actually the 49th because his first term when he was 45 would have made him 46, because in 1918, Woodrow Wilson suffered a debilitating stroke as World War I was winding down. He went to Europe for conferences on what to do with the defeated Germany, and was stricken maybe at first by the pandemic of that era, the Spanish flu, but then had a full-scale stroke. But the last year of his presidency, he was not seen, did not make appearances, basically was sequestered in a White House bedroom. And Edith Wilson received reports from what was going on at Congress, and she took it upon herself to get his signature on documents and whatnot. A lot of experts looking back on that now say Wilson was not capable of being president or anything else at that stage after a severe stroke. So Edith Wilson actually served about a term as president, just as Dr. Jill Biden served as president in Joe Biden's troubled times. they may have known about this prostate cancer a couple of years ago, as advanced as it is. And the bottom line is, despite all that, despite Joe Biden becoming a national laughingstock, because it was obvious to anybody paying attention that he was not fit to be president, but she enjoyed it so much that it was not Joe Biden who announced he was going to run for re-election. It was Dr. Jill Biden, who was seeking her second term as president. And anybody who doesn't believe that is simply not looking at the facts. Now, all that being said, my prayers are being launched for Joe Biden. I feel terrible that this has happened to him. His legacy is already destroyed, and now he's got this terrible disease, which some doctors say, if aggressively treated, may prolong his life. But he's in deep woods here, and certainly my heart goes out to he and his family, as corrupt as they may be. I don't wish that fate on anybody. He was a public servant / self-servant in our government for over 50 years. Again, from a humane standpoint, and as a person that has certainly feelings and respect for all my fellow citizens and brothers and sisters in this country, I feel terrible for Joe Biden, and my prayers are certainly being launched for him. One final note on this Monday: the big, beautiful bill, late Saturday night / Sunday morning, the Senate, or excuse me, the House Budget Committee voted to advance the bill. They've worked out a lot of their differences. There's some Republican mavericks that are grandstanding for their constituents, some that are actually committed to the government slashing spending dramatically to counteract this ridiculous deficit that we are moving into. But they've advanced that bill, and I've told you on this show, with everybody not understanding what the tariff situation was, the tariffs came a little bit early. I would have waited and imposed the tariffs when this bill passed Congress, because if the House on Friday approves it, as gets through a couple more committees, it will go to the Senate, and it's expected by the 1st of July to get through the Senate, and that will send it to the president's desk. This does so much for this country and for you and me and everybody else. It keeps the tax cuts Trump put in 2016 permanent, and it further, this is the big one for me, further slashes corporate tax down to a world low 15%. And if corporations can make their products here in America with a 15% tax rate, lower than anywhere else in the world, we will get such a surge of manufacturing and American ingenuity and products for, that we need every day. Right now, it's absolutely unconscionable that we are basically completely reliant on China for prescription drug manufacturing. That's got to come back to this country. This government sold out American business, sold out small town America, sold out Main Street to send all of their manufacturing overseas where they could get slave labor and better rates. Now that tide is going to turn with the passage of this bill, not to mention the complete unleashing of all of our energy capabilities, getting rid of all these ridiculous regulations that people have imposed from this bureaucratic, administrative Democrat state we've lived under for these last bunch of years, to get the business of creating fuel, oil and gas, clean coal, natural gas. We are going to be back in business. And you talk about a shot in the arm for the economy. It's the price of shipping goods and the price of manufacturing goods. And it takes energy to do all of that. And with energy prices falling to lows that we can't even imagine, you're going to see a surge between that and all the manufacturing and all the jobs in this country that you've never seen before. So hang in there. It's a renovation. It takes a little bit of time, but hopefully that bill will be on the president's desk right around July 4th, which is going to be a monumental accomplishment in the first half of year of his presidency. If that bill goes on through as it needs to, and if anybody's listening and has a phone, call your representatives in the House, your senators, you have 2 in every state, call them, tell them, get behind the big, beautiful bill. We've got to have it for our country to flourish. This is America first. We have a America first Pope, and we're going to have America first booming economy before the end of this year, and you can take that to the bank, literally and figuratively. I'm Kip Kiefer. That's what you need to know this week. Back next week with more here on TKR. Have a fantastic week, everybody.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.